Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show. You could find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe. And you could find us at realmeneatplants.com. We have an announcement today. This show has been airing for more than a year, and we have our first sponsor. And I'm very proud to say that our first sponsor is firstseedfoods.com, which is plant-based Indian food without oil, butter, or ghee. So check it out. And at checkout, put Glenn10 in the checkout code for 10% off. My guest today, I've never met before. Dr. Mark Hammond is an internal medicine physician with almost 40 years of experience. He's co-founder of Inpatient Physicians of the Mid-South, one of the largest independent hospitals and long-term care groups in the country. Dr. Hammond now serves as adjunct professor in the Department of Integrative Health and Wellness at the University of South Alabama, and he serves on the President's Council of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Hammond, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Definitely enjoy talking with you today.
All right. So tell us your story. Where did you train to be a physician, and tell us the route through which you eventually became a plant-based physician?
Sure. So I went to college in Memphis at Rhodes College, and the University of Tennessee Medical School is in Memphis. So all of my training was there in the 1980s. I did my internal medicine residency there as well and finished in 1986. So beginning at that point in time, I just started taking care of hospital and nursing home patients. I had a small office practice, but I had to give that up because I was so busy. And I became what's now called a hospitalist. It's a common term now, but when I started, I think maybe I was one of the first ones, because it was a doctor who basically goes to the hospital and is sort of the primary care doctor of hospital patients. And so I've done that for many, many years in Memphis. I was also in the Department of Cardiology. I did stress testing. And so I did non-invasive cardiology for a satellite hospital in Memphis. So that kind of got me started. I mean, for years, I was frustrated with the revolving door of medicine and how chronic disease just seemed to be a rescue model where it was just all about patching people up until the next time they showed up. And it just, I got to probably 15 years ago, I just got tired, and I continued to do my practice, but I just, as you know, received zero training in health promotion and integrative medicine, and certainly plant-based medicine was completely, probably even unknown, mostly in the 20th century. But I just started reading. I just started educating myself. I read, Dan Buettner's Blue Zones works. I read Michael Greger, everything I could get my hands on from Neil Barnard with the Physicians Committee. I started going to meetings there and just educated myself and became just convinced that I had missed the boat and really became on fire with this. I remember 10 years ago telling my partners in Memphis, if I ever get an opportunity to teach this, I'll do it for free because it's just fun. It's you feel like you found a long lost love in a way. And you feel, I give Physicians Committee and other organizations like that, nutritionfacts.org, Michael Greger, and others, a lot of credit for kind of getting me back in touch with why I wanted to be a physician in the first place, which was to help and empower people to be healthier. I mean, I think that's what all of us kind of get into it for, and the Western model just kind of chews us up and spits us out.
Well, at what point do you begin reading these books and decide to change your own diet? Because I'm guessing you weren't raised as a vegan.
That's a great. You can tell by my accent. I'll bacon and eggs for breakfast, ham and cheese for lunch, fried chicken for dinner. That
And were
was
you eating that way as a physician in your first decade or two as a physician?
That's a good question. No, I really, even from the time I was in med school, I wanted to know what was good for me. I really did have an interest in preventative medicine. There was very little information out there. But I became a relatively healthy omnivore, I would say, by the time I was in my probably late 30s, early 40s.
So until your late 30s, early 40s, you're not eating a good diet.
I would say I was eating a pretty poor diet based on my standards now, for sure.
Uh-huh.
Based on looking at how I ate compared to my
Right.
family and colleagues, I was in the top 10%, but that's a
A-
pretty low bar.
And were you starting to see any health consequences of your poor diet into your late 30s?
So I really wasn't. My cholesterol's, my total cholesterol, I think, as I recall, at one point, I remember at age 41 or 42, my total cholesterol was around 240.
That's
Uh,
getting up there.
Getting up there, my LDL was 130-ish. My triglycerides weren't terribly high, but I mean, and of course, 25 years ago, we didn't really know, if what you did for primary prevention. I say we probably some people knew. Obviously, Colin Campbell knew, but I had not had the benefit of understanding or hearing about the China study. So
Right.
there really wasn't that much around. But yeah, I started really getting aggressive on this about 15 years ago. And then I'd say probably for the last 10 years, I've been about as close to 100% plant-based as anybody can be in the South.
Uh-huh. And so you managed not to get any severe health problems from your poor diet.
I would say so, with the help of admitted. I took, I have a family history of heart disease. Both of my parents lived fairly long, but they both had bypass surgery in their
Uh-huh.
60s. So, I mean, coronary artery disease is clearly in my family tree. And I started taking atorvastatin 25 years ago, and it plummeted my numbers pretty quickly. But I kind of knew, not nothing. I mean, it's a great drug, but I kind of knew that there was a lot more I could be doing from a lifestyle perspective. I've always been an active person. I exercised a lot, so I kept my weight fairly much in check. But again, I didn't really get to the Michael Greger diet until probably 10 years ago. But about the time his original book, How Not to Die, came out.
Okay, so that was the book that got you onto either a vegan or vegan-ish diet.
I would say I would give that book and him the credit for being everybody, I guess, has their epiphany, where the light bulbs are kind of dimming and going off in a mild way. But
Uh-huh.
when I read that book, and I remember telling my wife, brought it home from Costco one day,
Uh-huh.
about 10 years ago, right when it first came out, and see, I think you need to read this book. And so I started reading, and literally every 2 or 3 pages, I would blurt out, "Why did I not know this? Why did I not know this?" I was kind of partly excited and partly angry, that
Right.
there was all this information out there that had been around apparently for decades. I knew about Ornish's study. I
Mhm.
knew about what Ornish had done in the late 90s. So I kind of knew some of this, but it just didn't get into my DNA for whatever reason, until Greger's book, and I give him a lot of credit for kind of being that final straw.
Okay. So once you went on the diet, do you consider yourself a vegan now? Are you on a vegan diet?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I am. I kind of look at it this way. Okay, if the grandkids are having a birthday party and there's cake and ice cream, I'll eat a few bites. It's not like
Mhm.
I'm, I've I've touched on the evil animal product. I can't live anymore. But I like to whole food plant based has always been a term that I like better because, like Gregor says, I'd rather vegan just tells me what you don't eat. And
Right.
although I do totally admire people who became vegans long, long ago for ethical reasons, and honestly, as I get older, I get more and more on that side of the coin of the ethical piece of animal agriculture and today being Earth Day and other
Yeah.
reasons other than to just keep my cholesterol down. There's a lot bigger picture reasons behind this. The most fascinating thing I came upon recently, I started, I never, I don't mean to bring religion or faith into this, but it's hard in the South to avoid that. But I grew up kind of in that traditional Southern Christian view of things. And I started about age 33, I started going to a unity church, which is kind of a not a well-known new thought movement from the late 1800s. And I had no idea. So basically, the premise of the faith was about spiritual healing. Myrtle and Charles Fillmore both started this, and they started as a study group, and they really emphasize the power of spiritual awareness and healing, that the spirit within, that spirituality is an inside out job rather than an outside in job, and much more of a universal view of faith, which I've always had. I never felt like the exclusivity that a lot of Christians claim. I never bought into that, and so it really was a great thing for me. So I'm bringing this up because in my studies, and I've done a couple of talks at our local church here, I started researching what the Fillmores had actually done, and they were radical vegans. They were incredibly. In fact, you read some of Charles Fillmore's writings. I've got the Lost Teachings of Charles Fillmore right in my office here somewhere,
Uh-huh.
and he talks about how eating animals, killing animals, first of all, lowers our threshold for killing, and that
Hmm.
wars can, we lower our threshold for killing each other. That when we consume animal flesh, we consume their energy. And I'm thinking this writing is 140 years old,
Wow.
and it's exactly, and he did all this without knowing anything about the gut microbiome, and I had to get to it from the science. And it's very humbling when you see something like that and you see how these people lived in their 90s and live vital, productive lives of service to help people heal both spiritually and physically. I just am awed that this information has been out there so long and I've not known anything about it.
And in that sect, are there still congregations, and do they follow that diet?
Not to my knowledge, although there is a growing awareness of this. Charles Fillmore apparently was influenced. He had a friend who was one of the early Seventh day Adventists. And so,
Uh-huh.
even though the doctrines I think are probably different in a way that unity is much more universal, he picked up on the lifestyle very quickly and was influenced heavily by the Adventists, as have I been as
Hmm.
I've studied. The Adventist studies are one of the key things I lean on to teach people about why it's so important to eliminate any animal products if you can, and to go as much plant-based as possible. If you look at those graphs in the Adventist study, they're just extremely powerful to look at. But yeah, it's not as, it's interesting. One of the original statements of faith in unity was that we choose not to eat animals. It is wrong to consume animal flesh, and it went into all the reasons why, and it was sanitized out of the original 36 statements of faith, because unity is very pro finding your own individualized path to the creator. And so they felt like it came on a little bit too strong, I guess. I don't know. One of Fillmore's kids wasn't a vegan. I think that's probably has as much to do as anything. But I just found it fascinating. And I'd never known this about them, being a Unity student for 30 something years and just coming upon this in the last couple of years when I've really researched, okay, now why did they live into their 90s and why, was it all about spirit? Yeah, well, I don't know about their spirit, but spirit, if I go into spirit and meditate, I usually get a to-do list. And one of those, obviously one of their to-do lists were to move more and eat plants
Wow.
and downshift as Dean Ornish says, eat well, move more, stress less, love more. And I think they epitomize that mantra.
Huh. So you've been teaching this diet in the South. In what kinds of settings and what has been the response?
Yeah. And so I started out, I did exercise stress testing at one of the hospitals in Memphis. So I would have, so in other words, this is when people come into the hospital with chest pain, or they come in as an outpatient, or they come from the emergency room. We had a mixture of patients that would come for cardiac stress testing, and they'd either get on a treadmill or they'd lay on a gurney and we give them a medication to simulate exercise. So I just found that a great opportunity to start doing some one-on-one teaching because I had a captive audience for about 15 minutes. I had nothing else to do other than look at the monitor and make sure their EKGs weren't going into a heart attack, which had happened about 1 out of every 100 of these that all of a sudden you start into full mode of being a physician. But 99 times out of 100, it's just 15 minutes instead of small talking with the staff or whatever. I just found what a great opportunity to start asking people about their lifestyle and letting them tell you. And almost every one of them would immediately get a guilty look on their face. But it was like they were grateful that somebody had taken, you're the first doctor that's ever asked me this about my lifestyle. And so I just had hundreds of these interactions with people, and the reactions were almost always very positive. But of course, as a hospitalist, I didn't get a whole lot of follow up on these folks. And so
Right.
I never really knew the outcomes. Every now and then I'd get somebody who would come back and seek me out and say, this like a firefighter took this to his station and made in Millington, right outside of Memphis, where there's a naval air station, and made this part of their program. And I was so when you hear those kinds of things, obviously you get very humbled. Down here, I've done some clinic work, volunteer clinic work. I see people on a volunteer basis now for lifestyle coaching. I do some teaching with the medical students, and so I have opportunities here to kind of teach a broader group. So there's not a whole lot of one-on-one patient stuff, but I've never shied away from that, and I do enjoy that. It's really kind of almost a hobby now for me.
You mentioned EKGs, Dr. Hammond, and I have a question about EKGs. I'm a little suspicious of them. I know they have their use, but sometimes I wonder if they are sort of business generators. And I say that because I know someone who twice has been sent to the emergency room, told she may have had a heart attack, and it turned out that she just has some abnormalities that come up on an EKG as potential heart attack. It's nothing wrong with her at all. In my case, it showed a left bundle branch block, and all that seems to mean is that my heart rate is a little lower than normal, which is actually potentially a good thing. Great athletes have a low heart rate. So I know EKGs serve a purpose, but are they also business generators?
Probably like anything in medicine, they can be revenue generators. Although I'll tell you, the average what I get to read and overread, I continue to overread EKGs to this day
Uh-huh.
for Methodist Hospital, and I think the average reimbursement for Medicare for an overeat is about $7. So I don't know that it's
Uh-huh. It's not big money.
no, no. So they're helpful. I mean, I think it's one of those great tools to quickly rule something out. If you're going to the hospital with chest pain, it's a great immediate screener. It's not diagnostic by any means, but it's a great fork in the road. Blood tests called troponins and some of the high sensitivity troponins, which detect damage to the heart muscle in the blood, uh, are used in concomitantly with the EKG, and when you use them together, they're great tools to rule in or rule out heart disease. But the EKG by itself is helpful. There's other things it's helpful for, like you're mentioning your bundle branch block, or rhythm issues can be detected on EKG. So they're a useful tool, and they're one of the few things in medicine that isn't very expensive. There's a lot of other revenue generators in medicine that probably need to be called out more than an EKG.
I read once that something like 1/3 of EKGs turn up abnormal. Is that your?
Yeah, sure. I'd say it's probably even a little bit more than that. There's a lot
Yeah.
of subtle abnormalities that you can tell if you've read. I did a calculation on this because one of the things I've done for really close to 40 years is done overreads on hospital EKGs. And I think I've overread somewhere close to 500,000. So I've seen my share of EKGs, and I can give you a pretty good broad stroke on that probably close to half are abnormal to a degree. There about 10% are really, you can look at and go, ooh, this
Right.
is a big problem. There's a lot of subtle abnormalities that don't mean much.
Right. So you could get a subtle abnormality that doesn't mean much and be sent to the emergency room. That's my issue.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
could be. You could be if you had a doctor that wasn't confident in their cardiac skills or their clinical skills. Yeah.
Right.
And of course the subtle abnormalities vary. Some subtle abnormalities are not quite as subtle. So there's a lot of gray area, and it requires clinical judgment, which sometimes
Some people don't have.
some people don't have, some do, some's got it and some ain't, right?
Right. And then you wind up in the emergency room, which could kill you from stress.
Yeah, right, right.
So that's my problem with EKGs. I know they serve a purpose, but I would just recommend to people that they be aware that an abnormality on an EKG is fairly normal.
Yes, it is. That's very, very true.
Okay. Now, did you find after you read Dr. Greger's book and you went on this mostly vegan, whole food, plant-based diet, um, that your own health improved?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've always been blessed with pretty good health. So, I mean, I've never really had any major hospitalizations. I'm 68. So I'm relatively young. My cholesterol has been perfect for 25 years. I continue to take statins. I honestly think I could probably get off of atorvastatin, but I'm a little chicken. My LDL is so good. I'm one of those physicians that actually does see a primary care doctor every year. I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in preventative, or let's call it the annual checkup and surveillance medicine. I'm a fan of that. I've had 2 colonoscopies when I was supposed to have them, and so I've been blessed with it. I will say this: I weigh what I weighed when I was in the 9th grade. Right now, I cannot eat. I eat more food now than I've ever eaten in my life. My waist keeps shrinking. For the first time since high school, about a year ago, I started wearing 32 waist pants, and I haven't done that since the 9th grade. I've been 33, 34. And I find that this pattern of eating, I hate to even call it a diet, but this pattern of eating just seems to keep, it's like the gift that keeps on giving, and it gets
Yeah.
better over time. After 8 or 9 or 10 years, I never would have expected to kind of continue to be dropping weight. I never was really overweight, probably
Mm.
borderline BMI 25, 26 at my worst, 178, 80 pounds. But I'm
Mhm.
right at 160 now, and I don't vary 2 pounds. And I weigh once a week, and I haven't varied more than 2 pounds in a couple of years now.
Yeah. Well, I'm in your age range and your waist range, and my pants keep falling off me, and I'm worried I'm going to get in trouble in public.
You're the answer to the healthcare problem. I can tell you that.
Oh, it's not me. It's the pattern of eating, as you say.
Yeah,
It's the just eating human food,
yeah.
and it just continues to stun me, doctor, that it's so hard for people to realize that we're not meant to be eating animals. We're not designed for it. The great apes don't have bacon and eggs for breakfast, and a turkey sandwich for lunch, and a steak for dinner with ice cream. So why is it hard for people to imagine that maybe we should eat a diet that's more in line with what herbivores eat and our cousins, the great apes, eat? We look more like the great apes. Whatever people's beliefs, I know in the South there's some skepticism about evolution, but we do look more like chimpanzees than tigers, don't we?
Of course, of course. And I try to use both Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, and evolution to say it's the same thing. If you change one day into 100 million years, you're in the same ballpark. So try not to get too hung up on it. Obviously, evolution is a real thing. You can't, to me, be a credible scientist and not believe it. But you can look at Genesis chapter 1. It says the exact same thing about giving green plants for all animals that crawl upon the earth. And I give you every seed bearing plant that you shall use as food. Pretty straightforward. That's obviously, and that's what the Seventh Day Adventists obviously use to create their dietary pattern. But yeah, you can look at our closest biological ancestors, and we share what 98, 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees and orangutans, and
Yeah.
they're not eating. I mean, unless they have no other way of getting food, they're going to eat plants. I mean, you look at the orangutan. If you go to a zoo and look at the cage, and you'll see it looks like Michael Greger's book. um, it's it's pretty obvious what we should be eating. There's no doubt, and your dilemma is the same dilemma that I share. Is how do I convince people? And for years I've tried the scientific approach. I've had people who are on my side, friends who maybe aren't 100% vegan but know what I'm saying is true, and they tell me that, doc, the science just doesn't mean as much to the average person as it means to you. I can look at those graphs of the Adventist hypertension and diabetes and just look at the stair-stepping increase of both as dairy, fish, and animal foods are added into the pattern and see this stair-step increase of chronic disease. I can look at that and get an emotional brain and heart reaction to this, consciousness reaction to this that the average person doesn't get. So, there is so much of our food choices tied up in our childhood, in the way that our mom or dad, usually mom in the South, nurtured us and used food as a substitute for love. And that's a hard one to break. And honestly, I think the older I get, the more I side with the folks that became vegans for ethical reasons in the first place, because that's hard to debate. Animal cruelty is a hard thing for anybody with any conscience left to look at that and go, this is an okay thing to be doing to fellow sentient beings. This just isn't right.
Right. And it's two sides of the same coin, because everybody, as you suggest, almost everybody feels that it's cruel what we do to the animals. But because they don't know the nutritional side of things, they convince themselves, well, but I can't look at that. I can't look at the factory farms because we need to eat animals, they think.
They
So if
think,
we need to eat it for the protein, then look away. But when they understand you don't need to eat it for the protein, I'm fine. I haven't been eating it for the protein for 50 years. I'm still standing up or sitting down right now, but I'm still fine. Then when you understand that not only is it not necessary to eat, but it's harmful to eat, then the cruelty becomes really hard to excuse.
right, right. And, there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people, I mean, God knows every single person that I've counseled on healthy eating in the last 10 years, I'll say 99% of them have given me some sort of iteration of Atkins, South Beach, caveman, low carb, keto, all these words that I've got to watch my carbs. And I go, wait a minute. I try to make it really simple for people to understand. So, the longest living people on earth have the highest intake of complex carbohydrates. And it's like, do you not understand that a Milky Way candy bar is not an apple? They both have a lot of carbs in them, but they're not the same food.
They're not even cousins.
They're not even cousins. It's not even apples and oranges. It's apples and destruction. But
And this nonsense word carbs is actually used by all the writers and scientists and advocates of the carnivore and paleo diet. They say the same thing. Oh, people have been eating too many carbohydrates, and they don't say what's a carbohydrate. Is it pure sugar? Is it a candy bar or is it a sweet potato? It makes a little bit of difference, doesn't it?
just a little bit.
Oh my
Just a little,
God.
doesn't
And
it
then
drive?
and you read the books and that's what they say. So I avoid carbs. Well, is that pasta? Is it bread? Is it an apple? Is it a sweet potato? Is it a candy bar? They're all different types of things. Vegetables, the healthiest foods on earth, leafy greens and broccoli and cauliflower is what, 85% carbohydrate.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And that's the only area I've found that we can find common ground with most of the keto people is they have to, because my oldest brother's gone keto and he's lost a bunch of weight and he's bragging about it. And I just said, look, Rick, when you start gaining weight back, you gain 10 pounds back. Will you please give me a call? Because that's going to happen. I've never seen a single patient in 40 years who's lasted more than 2 or 3 years on it because it's unsustainable, first of all. Second of all, it's kind of like we're trying to trick our biology. We're designed we have to break everything down to glucose. And so we're naturally going to crave carbs. It's a human, it's what we need for energy. So we're not going to fool our bodies into not eating carbs. And this is what people don't understand, and this is the biggest danger of low carb diets, is that people go on these and they lose weight probably 10 to 20% faster than they do on a whole food plant-based diet for the first 2 or 3 months. And because
some of the weight they're losing at the beginning of that diet is water weight.
Of course, they're getting ketosis, they're getting ketonuria, they're losing protein. Yeah. The problem is they lose it and they lose 20 or 30 pounds and they go, God, this is the greatest diet ever. I lost weight so quickly. And they fail. So they go back a year later, 10 pounds more than they started to begin with. And so they've gained back more fat than they have body protein. So they've lost muscle mass and gained fat, even if they come back at the same weight at what they started. So this is the danger of yo-yo dieting, is that not maintaining. I tell people all the time, if you're not serious about doing this for the rest of your life, then, and you know that this is it, this is going to be bad for you, because you're going to yo-yo back like 98% of people do on carb restriction diets. They work and then they don't work. And the don't work far creates far more danger than doing nothing at all.
Yes. And again, it's just the insanity of labeling things carbs when all plants have, other than maybe the occasional fatty fruit, is going to be predominantly carbohydrate. And these
Right.
are the healthiest foods in the world. I'm
Yeah.
going to change the subject a little bit by talking about something you mentioned before, that it's the culture. It's what people feed you. It's what people are fed by their mothers and fathers, and what they see eaten around them in the neighborhood and at picnics and in advertising. It's the culture that's really the problem. The culture is enforcing this idea that what people should eat is animals. And I learned something about culture back in graduate school. I was in theater graduate school around the time that you were graduating from medical school. And I was in Alabama. I was at the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. And I was in a playwriting program, and I was going to have my play produced at the theater. And the opening performance was going to be on a Saturday afternoon. And I knew it would be rough to get people to come to the theater on a matinee to see a new play by an unknown playwright. So I went around the campus handing out flyers, talking to students, going to classes, inviting people. And on the day of my opening, on that Saturday afternoon, I walked towards the theater and I saw crowds of people just converging towards the theater. And I thought, I've done it. I've gotten people interested in going to the theater on a Saturday afternoon in Alabama. And then they all walked past the theater to the football stadium. So that's what happens when you're up against the culture. It's just tough to get people to change.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, I hope this Saturday wasn't in the fall.
Yeah, it was.
And they weren't on the road. That was another problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the food, at events like that is even worse than what people normally eat on a daily basis. All the celebratory foods down here, whether it's Mardi Gras or just birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, it adds even more negative momentum to the Southern. I call it the Southern American diet. We know we're familiar with the sad American diet,
Right.
the standard American diet, but the Southern American diet takes the standard American diet and deep fries it. So, like,
Yeah.
we live, in I think last time I looked, Alabama ranked 48th in life expectancy. Some of that is due to African American life expectancy, which is a real, to me, it's probably the one area I'm most interested in right now. I've got a couple of projects locally here, one of which is Africatown, which is really, it's in the Mobile metro area. There was a documentary on Netflix a couple of years ago called Descendant, about the slave ship that was brought up from they knew was there because the slaves were brought over in 1861 after it was illegal to bring slaves over. And so the ship was purposefully sunk into Mobile Bay. And there was this whole scientific project to try to find it, first of all. And there's actually descendants of the slave owners who still live here. And there's descendants of the slaves who, after the Civil War, were given a part of land that's called Africatown that
Right.
still exists. And now there's a museum going up. So there's a lot of good energy over there. And there's several people I'm working with who are very interested in starting organic urban gardens. One of the leaders over there told me, 100 years ago, this was the breadbasket for Mobile County. And I'm thinking, that, I remember watching the documentary, and the question was asked, what does justice look like? And, how do you make justice out of 400 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow? Well, one way is to make that area the healthiest area of Mobile. And as I've told some of the leaders over there, your bar's not very high here. Your white people here don't eat very well. So, you're only 3 or 4 years behind them right
So
now.
can we turn Africatown plant-based?
We're going to make the attempt. And so I've made some friends over there. There's a Food for Life instructor. I don't know if you're familiar with the Physicians Committee and their work very much, but
Of course I am. Yeah.
they have Food for Life instructors all
Yeah.
over the country. And there's a lady in Mobile. She's actually going to speak at the ICNM conference in August in DC. I go to that every year, obviously. She's going to speak there. And so we're going to be training more Food for Life instructors to go into that area.
Great.
The idea came to me a couple of months ago that what PCRM has done with the Navajo Nation, and even last year, the Navajo leadership spoke at the Friday night dinner at ICNM. And so there's been a real push among the Physicians Committee to help the Navajo people regain their cultural foods. And I thought, well, why aren't we doing that with African Americans?
And what were their original foods?
Rice, corn, beans, the same thing in the Costa Rican Blue Zone. If you really, it's ground foods, and
Right.
West Africa is no different. And so I had a meeting 3 months ago with Neil Barnard and a couple of others, and just said, why don't we take this idea and let's go with the African American community, because I'll tell you, they're the fastest growing group of vegans of any ethnic group, which is a bit surprising to people. Part of this is, if you've been a culture that's been ignored and abused, and you're 6 years behind everybody else in life expectancy, and someone just treats you and listens to you like you're an equal, which is, I can't believe that we're still there in 2025, but you give people an opportunity to speak their truth, and you listen to them, and you show them that you care. I mean, these people have intuitive knowledge of who's in it for the dollar and who just wants to help. And that's what I love about PCRM. It's such a service related nonprofit to and come to ideas like that. And the reason I think it's got a chance to really be successful is there's a pride that I think can go back to eating your cultural foods. Just like, we've trained African Americans to eat the wrong things for several hundred years, and it's a Western indoctrination. If we can make this into a pride issue where you're regaining part of your culture by going back to eating beans, rice, squash, corn, etc., and not KFC. I think we've got it shot. I think that's, to me, that's the group of folks that I'm most interested in. We've actually even got another nonprofit over here on the Eastern Shore where I live, down in Fairhope, which is a wealthier enclave, but we do have a section of African American culture in South Fairhope that still exists. And so we're in the middle of rehabilitating an old school that was actually built by Booker T. Washington that sits on about 12 acres of land, and creating a cultural center and an urban garden where people are going to have access to locally sourced fresh, produce, which is
Mhm.
obviously one of the big problems in these underserved communities.
Do you feel that the climate has been punishing Alabama and Mississippi and Tennessee more lately than in the past?
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, as it has everywhere. I mean, there's no
Yeah, but
escape.
it seems like there've been a lot of tornadoes.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the middle, we tend to get more. I'm on the Mobile Bay here, so hurricanes are our number one issue.
Right.
But it's everywhere. I mean, how many people would have thought that you're in a hurricane zone in Asheville, North Carolina? I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
there's not. I mean, it's affecting everybody, and of course,
And do you think there's more acceptance of that reality now, or are the people still denying it?
I think it's probably 50-50,
Mhm.
which is way, which is ridiculous. It should be 99-1, right? But
Yeah.
a lot of folks have given up on science, unfortunately. And I haven't. I mean, I may sound like somebody who thinks that all you have to do is eat the Dean Ornish, Michael Greger lifestyle, and your life's going to be perfect. It's much more complex than that, and we still need rescue medicine. Even those of us who need that. I'm not against it, but we need things working together. We need complementary medicine, and that's what I'm really dedicated in changing. I do think that there's a lot of movement, especially in organizations like the American Medical Association, American College of Cardiology. The recent study um, was done over at Stanford, the twin study, Chris Gardner. Um, there's a lot of major institutions that are getting on board with the plant-based model. The last couple of years, our keynote speaker last year at ICNM in the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine for your listeners, is the most important, I think, nutritional conference in the world every year. It's held in DC in August, and PCRM puts it on. The keynote speaker last year was the editor in chief of the Lancet, probably the most prestigious medical journal in the world. This year, it's going to be the incoming president of the AMA. So I'm heartened that there are more powerful organizations and entities that are coming on board. The data is just getting so incredibly strong on this.
It's getting kind of hard to deny, isn't it?
Hard to deny. And, I'm sobered by the fact of, I think it was Gregor who said this. He says, it took 8,000 studies.
Yeah.
You've heard that before to get to
The cigarettes.
yeah, you've heard that analogy. Yeah. So
Took 8,000 studies to prove that cigarettes cause lung cancer. You'd think that 6,000 might have been enough, I think is
right.
how
You
it
think that 6,000 might have been enough. And I don't know how many we have in the plant-based world, but it's at least 1,000, and it's growing every day. I saw something today about associations that blew my mind. That was a 60-year study.
Well, here's the one that does it for me. And it was done in, I think, 1912 or 1913. A Russian scientist named Dr. Anishkov, I think his name was, Anatoly Anishkov. He proves, and I'm sorry some rabbits had to suffer for this, but he proved that when you feed egg yolks to rabbits who are natural herbivores, the rabbits get atherosclerosis.
Yeah.
And when you feed the egg yolks to omnivores, like the dog, they don't get atherosclerosis. And so atherosclerosis is a disease that forms in herbivores that are fed cholesterol.
Right.
In nature, there is one animal that gets atherosclerosis commonly, and it's the human being, because we are herbivores that foolishly feed ourselves cholesterol.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what else you need after that one.
It's like,
What else do you need?
yeah, that should have been, I'm out, exit
Yeah.
stage, right here.
1913, we all
Thank
should have
you.
said, oh, it's done.
Yeah, like, yeah, yeah,
Herbivores fed cholesterol doesn't work out.
yeah. And,
I mean, we weren't designed to get heart disease. Whether you believe in a creator or just evolution, why would we get designed to have heart disease?
right.
Often at such a young age.
We weren't. And that's where I think, I believe in both. I believe in the creator and I believe in evolution. I think it's just, we're just finding out the ways of the genius, because the genius, and this is what has really amazed me. I go back and read that. I'm not a big Bible reader, believe me, but I go back and read that chapter 1, verse 29 of Genesis. It's just so clear in black and white what we're supposed to be eating. And I guess this was some vision that Moses got however many thousands of years ago. The creator realized it's going to be hard to explain the gut microbiome to Moses, but I think Moses can understand something as clear to understand that you're supposed to eat plants. Here's the garden, here's the plants, eat them, and don't get messed up with anything else. Where it got sideways, as I hear some of my omnivore friends and colleagues, especially those in the clergy, of talking about we're given dominion. Well, you don't understand the word dominion means stewardship, and
Right.
it means care and kindness and stewardship. It doesn't mean domination.
Yeah. Good point. Well, I know, Dr. Hammond, you have to, excuse me, you have to go at this point, but it's been a pleasure getting to know you. And will you come on another time and maybe give us a progress report about Africa Town?
I would love to. This is, as you can tell, I enjoy this. I could go on for a long time on this subject. So yeah,
Okay.
and
Well, we'll have you back on and we'll talk about it.
yeah, I've got a Facebook page if anybody's interested. I
Oh,
try
what is that?
just Mark Hammond, MD.
Okay.
And there's a building healthy communities. If you're familiar with that movement, it came out of Plant Pure Nation
Yes.
documentary. PCRM has actually taken that over, and
Right.
we've started one here. It's called Eastern Shore Healthy Community, and we are on Facebook as well.
All right. And I will announce again that I have a sponsor on the show, firstseedfoods.com. I have eaten this food. I love this food. This is Indian food made without the oil, the butter, and the ghee. If you want it without salt, you could get it without salt. You put in Glen 10 at checkout for 10% off. Do you like Indian food, Dr. Hammond?
I do very much,
Well,
very
then you
much.
should put in an order with firstseedfoods.com.
I'm writing it down as we speak.
Very good. This is how the show succeeds. We get guests to order from the sponsor. This is a new this is a new modality.
Yeah,
But
we live in capitalism, right? That's what
yeah, but it
that's
really, look, I wouldn't have a sponsor I didn't believe in. This is really terrific food, and it's healthy food.
yeah,
And it's a lot less expensive than going to the restaurant. When you go to Indian restaurants, the food is often delicious but oily.
yeah,
And after a while, you get a kind of sensitivity when you get on a healthier and healthier diet that you don't like the oily taste,
right,
the
right.
oily aftertaste,
Yeah.
and too much salt.
Can't wait to
So
try it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try it.
very good. So thank you again, Dr. Hammond, and we will see you next time.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care.